Have you ever wondered why Europeans for over 500 years decided to eat the flesh of mummies? Yes, you heard that right, mummies. Those preserved bodies from ancient Egypt. This bizarre practice, known as mummia, was not just a fad or a dare, but rather a widespread custom that gripped the continent for centuries. The story begins with Europe's fascination with Egypt, a land of mystery, antiquity, and exoticism. The pyramids, the Sphinx, the hieroglyphs, and of course, the mummies, all captivated the European imagination. As explorers and adventurers brought back tales and treasures from the land of the pharaohs, the continent was swept up in a wave of Egyptomania. Now, amidst this fascination, there was one aspect that stood out, one that was so strange, it's hard to believe it was real. The practice of consuming ground-up mummies from Egypt. It seems preposterous to us now, but back then it was seen as perfectly normal. But why mummies, you might ask? The answer lies in the ancient preservation techniques used by the Egyptians. They believed that the body needed to be preserved for the soul to live on in the afterlife. To achieve this, they used a substance known as bitumen, a kind of natural asphalt, to embalm the bodies. This substance, dark and aromatic, became associated with the mystical properties of the mummies themselves. In Europe, this bitumen was believed to have medicinal properties. It was thought to cure a variety of ailments, from stomach issues to wounds and broken bones. So, mummia, the ground-up flesh of mummies, became a sought-after commodity. It was consumed in various ways, from being mixed in potions and medicines to being used as a spice in food. It's hard to imagine a time when consuming mummies was considered not just acceptable but beneficial. Yet, for 500 years, that was the reality in Europe. So, the stage was set for a bizarre chapter in European history, but how did they justify this peculiar habit? Well, stay tuned, as we delve deeper into this strange and fascinating tale. You might be surprised to learn that the consumption of mummies wasn't a macabre culinary trend, but a medical one. Yes, you heard it right. In medieval Europe, mummies weren't just regarded as intriguing artifacts from an ancient world. They were also believed to possess powerful medicinal properties. In the medieval mindset, the body and soul were interconnected. Illness was often seen as a physical manifestation of spiritual malaise. This belief led to some pretty unusual medical practices, one of which was the consumption of mummies. These preserved bodies were ground down into a powder known as mummia. This mummia was then mixed into potions or incorporated into various medical concoctions. It was thought that by ingesting a part of the mummy, you were, in essence, absorbing the strength and vitality of the ancient being. Quite a concept, isn't it? But it wasn't just any mummy that could be used. The mummies of nobles and high-ranking individuals were particularly sought after, as they were believed to possess stronger curative powers. The demand for mummy powder was so high that it became a common ingredient in apothecaries across Europe. The uses of mummia were as varied as the ailments it was believed to cure. Suffering from a headache? Mix a little mummia into your tea. Stomach disorders? A spoonful of mummia should do the trick. From bruises to bleeding, mummia was seen as a cure, all for a wide range of conditions. So, the consumption of mummies wasn't about a grotesque fascination with the dead, but a quest for health and wellness. It was a belief in the power of the ancient world, a belief that the wisdom and strength of the past could be harnessed to cure the ailments of the present. So it was the pursuit of health that led Europeans to consume mummies. But where did they get them? Well, that's a story for another time and another scene, so stay tuned. The demand for mummies in Europe led to the development of a thriving trade in mummified remains. Now this might seem odd to us today, but back then it was business as usual. The mummy trade was a complex network of routes and methods used to transport mummies from Egypt to Europe. It was a bustling industry, with its own set of rules and practices. The mummies were often transported through the Mediterranean Sea, making stops at different ports along the way. From there they would be moved overland to various cities across Europe. Of course, getting these mummies wasn't as simple as walking into a store and buying one. Grave robbers played a significant role in this trade. These individuals would sneak into ancient tombs and pyramids under the cover of darkness, pilfering the mummies from their eternal resting places. These acts were not only disrespectful, but also illegal. Yet, the high demand and lucrative rewards made it a risk that many were willing to take. As the trade continued to grow, the supply of mummies began to dwindle. After all, there were only so many ancient tombs and pyramids in Egypt, and the number of mummies was finite. The depletion of mummy supplies became a significant concern. This shortage led to an increase in prices, making mummies a luxury item that only the wealthy could afford. Despite the high prices, the demand for mummies did not decline. This persistent demand led to a rather unfortunate development in the mummy trade. As the supply of genuine mummies dwindled, the trade in mummies took a dark turn. Unscrupulous traders started to produce fake mummies to meet the demand. They would take bodies, treat them with the same preservation methods used on the original mummies, and then sell them as the real deal. This dark twist in the mummy trade is a stark reminder of how far people are willing to go when profit is at stake. The mummy trade, once a booming industry, ended up as a grim business fueled by deceit and driven by greed. With the shortage of real mummies, counterfeit mummies began to flood the market. As the demand for mumia soared, unscrupulous traders found a lucrative business in manufacturing fake mummies. They would take the bodies of the recently deceased, animals, or even mix mud and herbs, and sell these as the genuine article. This led to an alarming increase in the consumption of what was essentially ground-up human remains, or, in many cases, entirely unrelated substances. This rise in counterfeit mummies, coupled with an increasing understanding of medicine and the human body, started to cast a shadow of doubt over the efficacy of mumia. Skepticism grew. People started to question whether consuming mumia was truly beneficial, or if it was just a grotesque practice rooted in superstition and misunderstanding. By the 18th century, the medical community began to openly criticize the use of mumia. They argued that it had no real medicinal properties and was in fact potentially harmful. This shift in medical opinion was a significant blow to the mummy trade. As more and more people began to trust in the emerging medical science, the demand for mummies dwindled. By the early 19th century, the consumption of mumia had largely ceased. The once thriving mummy trade had come to an abrupt end. The practice of grinding up mummies for medicinal purposes was relegated to the annals of history, a curious yet macabre chapter in the story of medicine. However, the legacy of mumia still lingers. It serves as a stark reminder of how far we've come in our understanding of medicine and the human body. It's a testament to the power of belief and the lengths people will go to in their quest for health and longevity. While the practice of consuming mummies has long since ended, it remains a fascinating if somewhat disturbing chapter in European history.